have remained high and continue to remain high. Right? The level of disasters have continued. Right? So a lot of the factors that were there in 2007, 2008 are still there. In addition to that, the food reserves, the world food reserves are down about 20-25%. So that we have less buffer now than we had in 2007, 2008. So anytime there's a slight shortfall in the supply, you're going to see it manifest itself in the price, because there's a limited buffer. Right? Again, I want to emphasize that for better consultation, we have to be better organized. Right? The non-agricultural private sector are organized. Right? Governments generally don't go and make any nonsensical trade decisions without consulting the Chamber of Commerce, right? Or in particular. So it is imperative that the agriculture sector is also organized in this context. I'd like to draw the analogy from the Dominican Republic, where the farmers are under an umbrella organization called JAD, Junta Agro Empresario Dominicano. Right? And not a minister of agriculture is appointed in the Dominican Republic without consultation with that body, because of the political strength and power and advocacy that they have, and they're united. Right? If there is a banana problem in the Dominican Republic, the banana farmers don't lead the fight. It's perhaps the sugar farmers will lead the fight, but they're all united. And we have to be organized if we to get that here. Let me say also that as a person, I don't believe in exports. I've been chairman of a company that tried to export a lot of things, and we lost tremendous amount of money.
You mean extra-regional exports?
Extra-regional exports. Extra-regional exports, right? I think Barbara is the one who said it earlier today, that if we imported $5 billion of food, right, and most of that import is not well, of course a fair amount of it is in cotton, corn and soybean and that type of thing, but a lot of it is in vegetables and fruits and ready to cook and ready to eat processed products, right? So we should be able to be looking at that area in the first instance as we move forward. The question of risk insurance, some work is being done on that. The problem, I can't remember the term of it now, that is linked primarily to the hurricanes and rather than to flooding, right? And this, I think it is triggered by the level of the speed of the wind or the speed, rather than by, and as you know, the damage from hurricane is due to both wind and water. So, but they're looking, the World Bank and IDB, they're looking at that process. Let me go to a contentious thing. This is not a cardi position, this is a personal position. I don't believe that agroenergy is deleterious to Caribbean agriculture, right? What's going in that area? Look, the sugar industry is dead, almost, except maybe for Belize and Guyana. Even Belize and Guyana, even Guyana, I understand, is having some problems with the economics of sugar, right? But we have a whole number of people whose culture and technology is based around sugarcane production. Not sugar production, around sugarcane production, right? And sugarcane is a much better converter of sucrose, material, biomass into energy than corn. So we could use that area that will run, as in Trinidad, is vacant, fallow, right? We do that. Then we have some areas in Haiti that very little other things could grow in it, right? And Haiti has the greatest diversity of jatropha in almost maybe in the world, right? we can't, the soils are so eroded that very little else could grow on it. So we could be using those lands to produce tropophone, which cannot grow food anyhow. Right? So to me, it's not a question of, as opposed to America, but there are issues that I don't want to talk to know, but if you have less corn going into the world food supply, therefore we in the region would therefore have to pay more for corn. That's another issue, right? But in terms of us substituting biofuels, I don't see it as a substitution at all. It's utilizing land resources that are likely to remain outside of the productive sector. Well, I think I talked too much.
I think that fundamentally, listening to what's been said all today, and even given my own experience in covering a lot of these stories, that we're fundamentally coming to what I consider to be the biggest crisis in the region. And it is not government, but governance. The extent to which we as a people govern ourselves at a personal level, to look at green not merely as a financial thing, but actually a quality of life issue. I mean, Steve is a very smart fellow. And advertising this, if you don't like what you're being told by the marketplace, you change the conversation. So when he was getting pressure on the green, he said, well, it's a money thing. And that is what we have had to do to be able to sell a fundamental necessity to our poor people. Look where we reach in the 21st century, that we have to look at something as fundamental to our existence in strict monetary terms. And it is unfortunate because, again, at the heart of it is governance. I understand why people don't want to talk about nutrition and why they want to push food. Because the governments are being told, you are existing in an ivory tower. We are going through the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Food prices are at an all-time high. Bring down the price of food. We have a government in Barbados that elected itself on the premise that it is going after the cost of living, and the cost of living, and then the cost of living. And their idea of dealing with that hydra-headed monster, their solution is to try to bring an American budget retailer. That's their idea of shoring up the food security of Barbados, by bringing in an American importer of more Dole lettuce and more tomatoes from Idaho. We have fast food industries that have developed. Subway is a classic example, where I see, going into the back door, boxes and boxes of tomatoes and lettuce that are not being grown in this country, in the Caribbean at all. But then we're told, well, we have to meet the specifications of the franchisee. Well, then we should not have that franchisee in the place. Just as how the Americans have been very good at protecting their own industries and getting around it, we need to learn from other countries, not necessarily the rich ones, the small ones, and they're not always in the developing world, how to get around these issues and deal with that kind of problem when you get to world trade. So price has had an impact, and what the politicians are doing is that they're simply not listening. And I've seen it here today. I've seen situations where the ministers aren't listening to the technocrats. The technocrats aren't listening to the farmers. The farmers are listening to nobody because they've been doing it that way for so long, and they don't like to listen to their extension officers. Tell the truth, they don't like to listen to them because they say that all this comes from Jesus Christ College, as my father would say. They got the piece of paper, they sit down in the ministry office, they don't do nothing, then they come out and want to tell me what to do. That is the thinking. So fundamentally, I would suggest we're dealing with governance, governing our own needs, and to suggest that perhaps there's nothing wrong with going small. Small is beautiful. We had an economist who died in 1977 who wrote about small is beautiful. I And when you read that book, he is predicting and presaging all that we're going through now. That our current models that we've imported lock, stock, and barrel from donor agencies are unsustainable. And it is, and finally, the reason I think we continue to spin top in mud, as they say, is because actually the things that we really, really want to do, when you look at it, they're funded by donor agencies. How much of what really, really needs to be done is funded by CARICOM, is funded by our national governments? How much money is put into bringing us together to do what needs to be done? It has to come from the donor agencies. And if it is donor funding, it must be donor funded thinking. Because when the project ends, so does the thinking. I sat here and I heard about Fondor. There's a demonstration project. Not so, in Fondor, where they're dealing with the pig processor, the pig farm, and how the effluent is going into the river. And there's a demonstration project to show how they can manage the effluent and get away from the watershed, the runoff going into the river, then into the sea. But the project wrap up. So now that the project wrap up, the thinking wrap up too. So it's a fundamental issue of governance. If we really, really think that our health, our well-being, must be sustained by ourselves and for our children's sake and their children's sake, we have to change fundamentally how we approach these issues, and it has to be governance.
We talk about nutrition, and then when we put forward a policy, that will be it. I think that if we start to understand some of the challenges with getting people to eat nutritious, having come through the sugar revolution and all the exposure to sugar and salt and processed foods, you now have to recognize that our tastes are more aligned towards those types of things. And trying to get people to eat nutritious is not just as simple as coming up with a policy. We have to look at the taste temptation that is involved. All y'all in here are busy people. Do you know that your body starts to crave sugar and salt when you're under stress for long periods of time? A lot of fruits and vegetables, they're not convenient to walk with. They spoil quickly. I just had a banana, it was turning brown, and I didn't have it for 2 hours. You have challenges in terms of the lack of portability, your risk of waste. People feel more guilty about throwing away fresh food than they feel about burning up credit on their phone. And that's just how it is, because we've been taught to think that food is valuable and it has some kind of tangible benefit, and we're more concerned about wasting it than spending money on cell phones for some strange reason. But we also have to look at, because food tends to be seasonal, sometimes there's an unpredictable schedule. When we're talking about things like, in terms of the consumer taste, fruits and vegetables are a moral ground for lots of people. My father is 77 years old, and he does not like to eat vegetables. He eats raw provisions, but not vegetables. These are things, people have their taste issues, and to reorient them, a lot of it was because we didn't have access to a lot of the processed food, but now that people have access and have been exposed, bringing it back now to food security and saying, well, once we grow everything that we want here, all of a sudden, we're going to get people to eat it. We now have a tremendous challenge on our hands because our palates have been conditioned in serious and significant ways. Most people will tell you they know they're supposed to eat healthy, and they'll still leave the salad. How many of y'all ate mostly vegetables and just a small amount of carbs at lunch and all of these things? Huh? And all of us ain't here all the importance. But we're still going to eat. And when we talk about food security, it's not just about bringing the food and making it available. When we talk about nutrition, it's not an abstract thing. This is what you need for your body. We got some serious cultural issues to address.
But we eat broccoli. We all of a sudden, you weren't eating broccoli 40 years ago.
But you know, part of it is the whole marketing. If you go and you look at those developed countries, there's a watermelon board, there's a broccoli board, there's a mango board, there's an avocado board now in the US pushing avocado in a big way. There's a papaya board, there's a board for everything with all kinds of marketing and advertising and all of this kind of stuff. Nutrition is now tied strongly with marketing. And the people who are not, if the money is not going to marketing, and now this is a problem with international cooperation. The FAO will tell you, we don't believe in advertising. We feel that, you know, somebody else should support. We help with technical assistance. But we need a large amount of funds to promote in significant ways the local propositions that we have. And we're not doing that. And what we also need, and I want to add to your governance, the other big challenge, I just had meetings with the Minister of Finance to discuss agriculture. And he said some very profound things. And a lot of it comes from if you don't have the governance at the farmer level, if you don't have the skills. He said, you come without information, you come without details, you come without plans on how you can do X, Y, and Z. I mean, I have my plans, my information, details. But to the rest of the sectors, the subsectors that were there, they were very unprepared. I told them for 3 years, I've been watching this food crisis and the oil crisis since 2007 and the economic crisis. And I told them it was coming. I told them be prepared. I told them have your national interest points all up there. But many of them don't even understand what they need to do and how they need to talk to government. And after explaining what we needed to do and how we needed to do it, we got some substantive support. But a lot of it comes down to you've not built the capacity at the farmer level, and then you want the farmer to come and talk to the international donor who's at that level, and you're not really giving them the kind of support that they need. You take a group of farmers and there's no group dynamics, no team building, and they come together, and you don't tell them how to stop thinking like an individual and start thinking for a sector. That's a significant change in mentality. And we don't address any of those things when you think that the farmer is going to wake up one day and want to meet the needs of every farmer around it. Different farmers all have all kinds of problems, and I'm going to talk to my board and explain to them the 80-20 rule. Whatever we come up with, it must benefit 80% of the farming sector, not 20. And it's an uphill battle talking to a farmer who comes to sit on a board and give his free time, and he know that he has a problem with monkeys and we want to talk with rats. And he don't want to hear that. And we've got to work through all of those mental things. And if you don't see anything happening after, well, what happens? The farmer drops off the board.
Any business sector has what they call it lines of credit. They have delayed payments. So if you want the farmers to act as a business person, they have to expect that when they sell their goods, they're going to get paid right away. So my point is we're confusing the farmer. We want them to act as a business, but we don't treat them as a businessman. We still keep hand feeding and spoon feeding and taking care of their problems and delaying their solutions all the time. But we always say, agriculture is a business, behave like a businessman. We don't send them to proper training, consistent training. We have a workshop this year, 1-2 years from now, and we expect them to all of a sudden they're an entrepreneur.
5 minutes.
So the question is, yes, we have, in agriculture we have mixed signals. Totally we have mixed signals. If the farmers want to be farmers, they want to stay subsistence and grow their thing for themselves in the community, that's their choice. This morning somebody mentioned the farmer has to choose what kind of road he wants to travel, he or she wants to travel. When they make that choice, nobody's going to budge him from that choice. And the government needs to recognize that if he or she not going to budge, don't try to push against a concrete wall. Move along. But then, like you said, it's a political thing. It is the constituency. And I like the point that Julius made, it's about personal governance. It's not about government, it's personal governance. So all the discussion we're having here in segment 1, segment 2, those we're going to have tomorrow, it comes down to the bottom line. It's a personal decision, it's a personal choice, whether you want to go green and you see green as a tree or you see green as a $100 bill in the US. Whether you want to, save water. Let me tell you a personal experience. I'm not one of those on frill and frill. I have been to a spa for years, but my friend and I went to a spa. And after the massage, and I sat in the shower, I was guilty like sin. Because in the spa, you have the water coming here, the water coming there, the water coming there. You have how much pipes? And for 20 minutes, those pipes kept pumping water on me. I said, oh God, I don't need 20 minutes to bathe. And I sat there feeling guilty like sin. I started to calculate how many, no, it doesn't matter. How many people come to that spa on a daily basis? and gallons of water pumping out from all directions just to rinse out.
Water, you know.
No, they don't recycle no water. My point is, how many people go to those things and think about those things? Hardly any, because spas are huge business. It costs them money to go to a spa. And I'm thinking, and if again the water workshop we're having across there, do those things come up? No, because these guys pay the water utilities high money for use of water. But the point is, water keeps going down the drain, flushing out to the sea, and everything is wasting. So unless we have a comprehensive resource policy that talks about how you make use of your water in various uses of water, we're not going to go anywhere. And the workshops we have in terms of everything kind of governance. Actually, the workshop is on governance, improved governance in the water utilities. So while we're talking agriculture, it's the same issues in spas, the same issues in other ministries. Again, the problem is nobody is bringing the discussions and the conversations together and coming up with one kind of conclusion. And the mixed signals in agriculture has to stop. You either want them to be business people or them as farmers, one or the other. They cannot, for years you've been confusing them to do both, and they cannot do both. And like you say, they're 57 years old, they're not changing them. 50 years old, unless they see that as a livelihood, they're not going to change. So we need to start in the schools, and the schools is a topic that we're going to have for tomorrow.
Just a few quick points, Zion. Firstly, if you wanted to not feel as guilty, when you go, you must think of how many people are employed in these spas, that you're contributing to employment. So go to these spas, give people them revenue. Secondly, you're talking about whether to treat them as farmers or entrepreneurs, as farmers we're talking about. And I heard Keely talk about the group dynamics, good governance. We've been doing that at Taba, working with them, treating them as businessmen, giving them contracts, telling them they'll be paid in 3 weeks, like normal business people. And it works, and at the same time it doesn't work. Some people don't want to go with it. You know what's happened to us now? Some of the farmers have decided they want to take over Taba. So they become like real sharks, like Steve and they. That's what they want to do now. They want to take over. So we've organized them and they've gotten so big now, they want to take over. Now,
is that a good thing or bad thing?
It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. For us at Taba, it's probably a bad thing because, you know, we created monsters, but it's a good thing that farmers are rising up and want to do their own thing. You know? But, you know, with this whole food and nutrition security thing, I wonder why, to me, it's a question to you, Diane, why we're beating ourselves up so much. Because, to me, as I was saying, Greg, I think development takes time. And I think to myself, we have campaigns about smoking, against drinking and driving. People still smoke, they still drink and drive. There are laws against smoking in public. They'll thief a chance and smoke. They'll build houses on the edge of a precipice and they'll crash and then blame the government. You know, we always have all these issues. So why in agriculture we want to beat ourselves up when we don't get things right quickly? It happens in the US. In Japan, they say, don't build near the coast because of the tsunami. Then they still build near the coast. And when they wash up, nobody thinks about these things. So why we beat ourselves up as much? I think that with food and nutrition, we need to keep promoting it. As the gentleman said across there, is personal governance. It's like one person, one voice crying in the wilderness. We need to do it one at a time, promoting it. And I remember this guy from Republic Bank, Ronald Harford, told us last week at the Caribbean Business Investment Forum that he looks at what's happening in agriculture. One thing he notes is that there's little leadership. Somebody needs to champion a lot of these causes. And I think that as much as we want to deny it, we need the government, the ministers, to play a key role. In most cases, not to, well, I have no passport to lose, not to blame anybody, but the ministers don't take leadership. I think they're the ones that need to come out and say, this is what we are pushing, because the private sector alone can't do it. The individual farmers, as strong as they are, whether Kafan or Kaba, or Winfer, they cannot be the ones to drive it. The main people here who we seem to be neglecting are the consumers. They might want it, but we need somebody to champion it and to promote it, just like the no smoking and the no drinking and driving and all these things. We need a champion in the industry, and I think that's the only way over time, and I'll say that and stress it, over time, that's the only way we can get our food and nutrition thing done.
I just want to speak to the issue of food and nutrition security from the point of view of the role of agriculture. Because we continue to forget that there's so many players that have to contribute to the attainment of food and nutrition security objectives. And very often, the challenge we face is to bring those players together at the national level and the regional levels. The people involved in social development, health, nutrition, education, and so on. And the experience has been that it has been very often left agriculture, but agriculture is not the one that can really drive this thing on its own. And therefore, where we place food nutrition security policy is something we need to look at. Maybe at a higher level, some appropriate ministry that where you can actually get some movement. But I still remain concerned that even if we achieve this, that the real commitment and leadership from the level of the public sector, the policymakers, is a concern, area concern. I'm not convinced that over the years they have really taken to food nutrition security as a fundamental issue in terms of really bringing about structural changes in the agricultural sector. It still continues to be very often short-term approaches as against long-term development strategies for agricultural development. The point made by Dr. Chesney about what will happen in 2050 in terms of the world population being 9 billion and so on, points to the fact that it is not going to be an issue of food prices, it's going to be an issue of getting food. Whether we'll be able to access food. And therefore it's a fundamental issue that we need to address from now to build the necessary systems and structures and so on within the region to be able to feed ourselves. And this is not going to happen through any national efforts. It really, at the end of the day, is going to depend on significant regional cooperation. And it's going to require significant investment in new types of production systems and processing systems, because a lot of what we import is really processed food. Our consumers are oriented towards a lot of processed food, and we need to add value to a lot of what we produce. If not, we are just going to continue to produce primary goods all the time. And therefore, we need to identify who will be those new entrepreneurs in the private sector who will make that move. I don't think it will be those who are right now our front runners in terms of private sector leaders, because they have not taken up the challenge. Very few companies in the region, private sector companies, have in fact taken up the challenge to try to get involved in serious agriculture. And therefore it's going to be a matter of trying to encourage a lot more cooperation among farmer organizations, farmer groups, to form clusters and viable entities to engage in some of the promotion and marketing that we need to engage in to make the breakthroughs that we talk about. Because I don't think that the traditional private sector that we have in the region is going to actually make that move. They are comfortable to continue importing the food, and in fact they are happy to do so, and they continue to support the governments, and the governments therefore are reluctant to really deal with them and stand in their way and implement the kind of policies that will bring about the fundamental change in terms of where we source our food. So that there needs to be a movement from among the producers, and it's true, maybe a new form of production collaboration, cooperation, where we organize producers into viable entities and we support them and help them to now emerge as entities that can engage in regional collaboration, cross-border investment, exploiting resources in Guyana and Belize and Suriname and so on, and the cheap energy in Trinidad, and working together to emerge as that new player that will have to lead the process. I don't think you can get it from the politicians. I don't think you can get it from the traditional private sector. Thank you.
I'm Cordia Thompson from Jamaica. I'm not convinced that the ministers of agriculture are interested in food security. I think that they pay a lot of lip service to it, depending on which way the wave, to use your word, Dan, is going. We in Jamaica have seen a lot of cyclical changes resulting from changing agricultural policies. In the 90s, we were faced with imposed structural adjustment, trade liberalization, and we saw a decline through the removal of tariffs on many of the subsectors. I speak specifically here of the dairy and the beef subsectors, and also overall the contribution of agriculture to GDP fell from 7% to 5%. We were producing approximately 28 million gallons at the time, liters of milk, and we're now down to less than 10 per annum. It was rationalized that we should import the milk powder. I'm sure the Eastern Caribbean knows a lot about that. And then milk powder became too expensive on the world market, and it was just the highest bidder who could buy milk powder. Fast forward many years later, the government seemed to have seen the light, government of the day, and some money now has been pumped into the dairy sector, into the beef subsector, and they are now back on track to produce. However, 2 weeks ago, the subsector leaders were invited to a forum by the Ministries of Finance and Agriculture to discuss a green paper under the tax reform of agricultural products, where they are proposing that the CARICOM external tariff on agricultural produce be reduced from 40% to 20%. How does that happen within what? From the mid-90s to 2011. We now are seeing the contribution increasing from 5% GDP to 5.8% in 2010, when it was 7% in the 90s. And now in 2011, we're going to repeat what was happening in the mid-90s. The larger agri-entrepreneurs have now dropped their hands and they're saying, listen, you tell us if this is going to be a reality, because we have no interest in putting any more money in agriculture, because the policies seemingly are going to change. So this is why I'm saying, and this sector leaders suspect that it's not necessarily tax reform, but it's coming from some other region. Maybe a multilateral lender is dictating the terms, because we know that there are some producers from the US who are knocking on our doors to sell us chicken and other such products.